The night my life shattered began like any other. I was supposed to be attending a conference in a city far from home, but fate had other plans. Instead of business meetings and presentations, I found myself unraveling the threads of the life I thought I knew. My name is Alex Carter, and at 49, I had built what I believed was an unshakable foundation. I had been married to my wife Laura for 24 years. We had raised two incredible children, Ryan, 22, who was charting his own path, and Sophie, 20, an ambitious college student with dreams of changing the world. Together, Laura and I had faced life's ups and downs, each moment a testament to our love and commitment. Or so I thought. On that Thursday, as I headed to the airport, something felt off. Laura, usually so attentive, had only given me a perfunctory goodbye kiss before rushing off to work. Her smile had seemed forced, her eyes distant. I chalked it up to stress. Lately, her career had demanded more of her time, and we both agreed sacrifices were necessary for success. Still, I couldn't shake the nagging feeling that something was wrong. My flight was scheduled for 6:00 p.m., and I had planned my day meticulously to ensure I'd arrive early. But life, ever unpredictable, threw a wrench in my plans. A snowstorm in Minneapolis caused delays, and after an agonizing hour of waiting, the flight was canceled altogether. Disappointed, I arranged for a new flight early the next morning and resigned myself to returning home. By the time I pulled into my driveway, it was past 10 p.m. The house was dark, Laura's car absent. Odd, I thought. She should have been home by now. Exhaustion from the day weighed heavily on me, but curiosity pushed me forward. I entered the house quietly, half hoping to be greeted by the warmth of Laura's presence. Instead, I was met with an unsettling silence. The living room tie flickered faintly, left on despite no one being there to watch. A glass of wine sat abandoned on the coffee table, its contents untouched but fresh enough to suggest Laura had been there recently. My heart began to race as questions flooded my mind. Where was she? Why hadn't she answered my earlier calls? Grabbing my phone, I dialed her number. It rang longer than usual before she finally picked up, her voice unnervingly casual. "Hey, Alex," she said, her tone light but distant. "What's up? Where are you?" I asked, trying to mask the unease creeping into my voice. "Oh, just at home, watching some shows," she replied. The words didn't align with the evidence before me. My pulse quickened, and I forced myself to stay calm. "Strange," I said carefully. "I'm home, and you're definitely not here." There was a pause, long enough to tell me I had caught her off guard. "Oh, I mean, I had to run out for a bit," she stammered. "Errands, you know. I'll be back soon." Her explanation was thin, her voice too rehearsed. The Laura I knew, my Laura, was a terrible liar. A cold realization began to take shape, one I desperately wanted to deny. For years I had trusted her implicitly, but now doubt coiled tightly in my chest. Hanging up, I sank onto the couch, the weight of uncertainty pressing down on me. My mind replayed every moment of our marriage, searching for clues I might have missed. Had she been distant lately, more secretive? A memory surfaced, a late-night conversation weeks ago, when she mentioned needing space to focus on herself. At the time, I dismissed it as harmless, even healthy. But now, it seemed like a harbinger of something far more sinister. Unable to sit still, I paced the living room. Each step churned up more questions. Was she with someone else? If so, who? Why? A part of me clung to the hope that there was a reasonable explanation, but the pit in my stomach told a different story. Determined to uncover the truth, I checked the location of her phone using an app we had both installed months ago after a family trip. The GPS pinged her at a lakeside estate an hour away, a place I didn't recognize, far from anywhere she would normally be. My heart sank. The evidence was mounting, yet I clung to denial. Laura couldn't be cheating. Not her, not us. But deep down, I already knew the truth. The drive to the lakeside estate was a blur. Snow flurries swirled in the headlights as I sped down the highway. My mind racing faster than the car. My thoughts tangled into a storm of possibilities, each more damning than the last. Could it be a work-related event she hadn't mentioned? A surprise for me? But why the secrecy? The lies? My hands gripped the steering wheel tightly as I navigated the winding road leading to the estate. The GPS pinpointed her location with unnerving accuracy, showing her still at the sprawling property. The name Mills Lake Estate flashed on a weathered wooden sign as I approached. It was a place I'd only heard about in passing, a luxurious retreat for the wealthy. What was Laura doing here? I parked a short distance away, careful not to attract attention. My breath fogged in the cold air as I stepped out of the car, my shoes crunching against the snow-covered gravel. A massive stone wall encircled the estate, its grandeur a stark contrast to the storm brewing inside me. Scaling it wasn't an option, but the property bordered the lake. I decided to take the longer, quieter route along the shore. The icy wind bit at my face as I trudged through the snow, heart pounding with each step closer to the truth. Finally, I reached a point where the estate's lights spilled onto the lake, their reflections dancing on the frozen water. A large mansion stood before me, its windows glowing warmly against the night's chill. My stomach twisted as I wondered which one of those rooms concealed my wife. Peering through the trees, I spotted movement inside. A man's silhouette crossed a second-floor window, then disappeared. Moments later, a woman appeared, her form unmistakably Laura's. She moved across the room with the grace I had once found mesmerizing, but now, the sight of her felt like a knife twisting in my gut. I climbed a sturdy tree for a better view, the rough bark biting into my palms. From my vantage point, I saw Laura sitting on a plush couch, her laughter faintly audible through the closed window. She looked carefree, a glass of wine in her hand as she chatted with someone out of view. The scene struck me with cruel irony, her joy so starkly juxtaposed against my turmoil. Then, the man reappeared. He was tall, sharply dressed, and exuded an air of confidence that immediately set my teeth on edge. He leaned closer to Laura, his hand brushing against her arm. She didn't pull away. My chest tightened as I watched the interaction, the final piece of the puzzle falling into place. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't an innocent meeting. Laura was here with him, and she wasn't thinking about me. I wanted to scream, to confront them right then and there, but something held me back. A voice of reason buried beneath the rage. A public outburst wouldn't solve anything. It would only give her an excuse to paint me as the irrational one. No, I needed proof. Cold, undeniable evidence. Balancing precariously on the tree branch, I pulled out my phone and began recording. The camera captured Laura's laughter, the man's arm draped casually over her shoulders, and the intimate ease between them. My hands trembled, not from the cold, but from the searing betrayal burning through me. This was the woman I had shared my life with, the mother of my children, now acting like a stranger. The scene inside grew more intimate. The man leaned in, whispering something that made Laura laugh and playfully swat his arm. Then, to my horror, he cupped her face and kissed her. She didn't resist. Instead, she melted into the kiss, her hands finding their way to his chest. I turned off the camera, unable to watch anymore. My chest felt hollow, the air around me heavy with the weight of my discovery. Climbing down from the tree, I stumbled through the snow, my legs weak beneath me. The cold didn't register. Nothing did. All I could feel was the gaping void where my trust in Laura had once been. As I reached my car, a new emotion bubbled to the surface. Anger, not just at Laura, but at myself. How had I not seen the signs? How had I let this happen? For years I had sacrificed for her, for our family, putting their needs above my own. And this was my reward? I sat in the driver's seat, gripping the wheel tightly, my knuckles white. My mind reeled with possibilities. I could confront her. I could expose her lies to everyone. But deep down, I knew neither of those options would bring me the peace I craved. Instead, I made a decision. I would confront her in a way she couldn't dismiss or deflect. I would make her face the reality of her actions and their consequences. I drove home in silence, the weight of the night pressing heavily on my chest. The video on my phone felt like a grenade, primed and ready to explode my carefully constructed life. Every mile closer to home only deepened the pit in my stomach. But it also steeled my resolve. Laura couldn't escape this. Not anymore. The house was dark when I arrived. I parked in the driveway and sat for a moment, staring at the front door as if it were a portal to another life, one I had no choice but to leave behind. Pulling out my phone, I played the video again, the glowing screen illuminating the car's interior. There she was, laughing, kissing, living a life that excluded me. My chest tightened as anger flared once more, but I forced myself to breathe, to focus. I sent the video to my email for safekeeping and locked my phone. Tonight, I needed clarity, not rash decisions. I entered the house, the stillness inside feeling oppressive. Memories of Laura and me flooded my mind. Our laughter, our fights, the countless mundane moments that now felt like lies. For a fleeting second, I considered waiting until morning to confront her. But the thought of her slipping away, concocting excuses or worse, returning to him, solidified my choice. I flicked on the living room lights and sat on the couch, facing the front door. My mind raced with what I would say, how I would confront her, how I would expose the truth without letting my emotions cloud my judgment. I wouldn't yell or scream. That would only give her an out. No, I would be calm, collected, and devastatingly clear. An hour passed before I heard her car in the driveway. The headlights swept across the living room window, and my heart pounded in anticipation. The engine cut off, followed by the sound of her heels crunching against the snow. Then came the jingle of keys and the soft click of the door unlocking. Laura entered, her face flushed, her hair slightly disheveled. She froze when she saw me sitting there, the light casting long shadows across the room. Her expression shifted quickly, surprise, confusion, and then a flicker of guilt that she tried to mask with a smile. "Alex," she said, her voice overly cheerful, "you're back early. I thought your flight." "Save it," I interrupted, my tone sharper than I intended. "We need to talk." Her smile faltered. She set her purse down slowly, her movements cautious. "What's going on?" I stood, pulling my phone from my pocket. My hands trembled slightly as I opened the video, my thumb hovering over the play button. "You've been lying to me, Laura," I said, my voice steady despite the storm brewing inside me. "And I know everything." Her face paled. "What are you talking about?" I held up the phone, letting the video play. The room filled with the sound of her laughter, the sight of her leaning into him, kissing him. Her eyes widened as she watched, her hands clenching into fists at her sides. When the video ended, I turned the phone off and looked at her, my jaw tight. "Who is he?" I demanded. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. Her face crumpled, and she sank onto the armrest of the couch. "Alex, don't lie to me," I snapped, the anger I had tried so hard to suppress finally breaking through. "Who is he?" For a moment, she didn't answer. Then, with a deep breath, she said, "His name is Peter. He's someone I met through work." My chest tightened at her admission, but I forced myself to stay calm. "How long?" I asked. "How long has this been going on?" She hesitated, her eyes brimming with tears. "A few months." A bitter laugh escaped me. "Months," I repeated. "Months of lies sneaking around, and you thought I wouldn't notice? Did you even care about what this would do to me, to our family?" Her tears spilled over, but I felt no sympathy. Not now. "Alex, I never meant to hurt you," she said, her voice trembling. "I didn't plan for this to happen. It just did." "It just did," I echoed, shaking my head. "That's your excuse. You didn't plan to destroy our marriage, but here we are." She reached out, but I stepped back, her touch like a spark threatening to ignite my fury. "I gave you everything, Laura," I said, my voice breaking. "I turned down promotions, sacrificed time, poured my life into this family. And this is how you repay me." "I know," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I know I've ruined everything, but please, Alex, let me explain." "Explain what?" I snapped. "How you betrayed me, how you kissed him like I don't exist. Go ahead, Laura. Explain it. Make it make sense." She broke down, sobbing into her hands. But I had no more patience for her tears. "I don't want excuses," I said, my tone cold. "I want answers, and I want to know why you thought he was worth throwing away 24 years of marriage." She looked up at me, her eyes red and swollen. "I don't know," she said, her voice shaking. I felt lost, Alex, like I wasn't enough, like we weren't enough." Her words hit me like a blow, but I refused to let her see my pain. "So you found someone else to fill the void," I said bitterly. "Instead of talking to me, instead of working on us, you went to him." She didn't answer. The silence stretched between us, heavy with the weight of her betrayal. Finally, I spoke again, my voice low but firm. "This marriage is over, Laura. I can't do this anymore." Her eyes widened, panic flashing across her face. "Alex, please," she pleaded. "Don't say that. We can fix this. We can go to counseling, talk to someone. I'll do whatever it takes." But I shook my head. "The decision already made. You made your choice, Laura, and now I'm making mine." I turned and walked away, her sobs following me down the hall. My heart ached with every step, but I knew there was no turning back. The life I had built with Laura was gone, shattered beyond repair. The next morning, I woke with a sense of finality. The confrontation from the night before played on a loop in my mind, her pleas still echoing in my ears. But despite the ache in my chest, I felt resolute. The chapter with Laura was over, and I needed to focus on what came next. As the sun crept through the blinds, I made a mental list. It wasn't enough to decide the marriage was over. I had to act on it. I needed to see a lawyer, make arrangements for the house, and most importantly, talk to Ryan and Sophie. My children deserved to hear the truth, and they needed to know that none of this was their fault. Before I could overthink, I reached for my phone. It was still early, but I didn't want to wait. I dialed the number of a lawyer recommended by a colleague months ago, during one of those casual conversations where you never think you'll need the advice. The receptionist answered, and after a brief explanation, I scheduled an urgent appointment for later that afternoon. With that done, I moved on to the house. Laura hadn't returned. Her absence was a sharp reminder of how fractured we had become. I started gathering my belongings, small things at first. Clothes, toiletries, important document. It felt surreal, packing up my life in boxes. The weight of years spent together reduced to a few bags. Around mid-morning, my phone buzzed. It was Ryan. I hesitated before answering, bracing myself for the conversation I dreaded. "Dad," he said, his voice warm but curious. "Is everything okay? You called late last night." I took a deep breath, steadying myself. "Ryan, there's something I need to tell you. It's not easy, but you deserve to know the truth." His voice grew serious. "What's going on?" "It's about your mother," I began, struggling to find the right words. She's been unfaithful." There was a long silence on the other end. "Unfaithful?" he repeated, his tone laced with disbelief. "Yes," I said quietly. "I found out last night. I confronted her, and it's clear that it's been going on for a while." Ryan exhaled sharply, the sound heavy with emotion. "I don't even know what to say, Dad. Are you okay?" "I'm trying to be," I admitted. "But Ryan, I need you to understand this isn't your fault, or Sophie's. Your mother and I made choices, some good, some bad, and this is where we've ended up. I just want you and your sister to know I'll always be here for you, no matter what." "Have you told Sophie yet?" he asked. "Not yet," I said. "I'll call her next. I wanted to tell you first." "Thanks, Dad," he said, his voice softening. "I'm here for you too, whatever you need." His words brought a lump to my throat. "I appreciate that more than you know," I said. "We'll get through this, Ryan. I promise." After we hung up, I stared at the phone for a long moment before dialing Sophie. She picked up quickly, her voice cheerful. "Hey, Dad, what's up?" "Sophie," I said, my voice trembling slightly. "I need to talk to you about something serious." The shift in her tone was immediate. "What's wrong?" "It's about your mom," I said, bracing myself. "She's been seeing someone else." Her gasp was audible. No, that can't be true." "I wish it wasn't," I said, "but I have proof. I confronted her last night, and she admitted it." Sophie was silent for a moment, and then I heard her sniffle. "How could she do this? To you? To us?" "I don't know," I said honestly. "But what matters now is moving forward. I need you to know that I love you and your brother more than anything. None of this changes that." "I love you too, Dad," she said, her voice breaking. I don't know what to do." "Take your time," I said. "Feel whatever you need to feel. And remember, I'm always here for you." We ended the call, and I leaned back in my chair, exhausted. Telling them had been harder than I imagined, but it was also a relief. The truth was out now, and there was no going back. That afternoon, I met with the lawyer. She was efficient and kind, guiding me through the initial steps of filing for divorce. We discussed the house, the division of assets, and how to handle communication with Laura moving forward. By the time I left her office, I felt lighter, as though I had taken the first real step toward reclaiming my life. When I returned home, Laura's car was in the driveway. My heart sank, but I pushed the feeling aside. I was determined to stay firm. As I entered the house, I found her in the kitchen, her eyes red and puffy. "Alex," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, "can we talk?" "There's nothing left to say," I replied, keeping my tone neutral. "I've spoken to a lawyer. The papers will be ready soon." Her face crumpled, and she reached for me, but I stepped back. "Alex, please," she begged. "We can fix this." "No, Laura," I said firmly. "You made your choice. Now I'm making mine." I turned and walked away, leaving her standing there, her sobs echoing faintly behind me. For the first time in weeks, I felt a glimmer of hope. Not for us, but for me. The road ahead would be long and painful, but I was ready to take the first step. The days that followed felt like a strange, slow motion blur. Laura had moved out, taking refuge at her sister's house. The quiet of the house was deafening, each room a reminder of the life we'd built together, and the betrayal that had torn it apart. But amidst the silence, there was clarity. For the first time in years, I wasn't weighed down by trying to fix something broken. Instead, I could focus on building something new. The lawyer's office became a second home for a while. Filing for divorce required patience and paperwork, but I was determined to get through it. Our assets were straightforward enough to divide, and since both Ryan and Sophie were adults, Custody wasn't an issue. The hard part was detangling 2 decades of shared life. One day, as I packed old photo albums into boxes, I came across a picture from our honeymoon. Laura's smile was radiant, her eyes filled with the love and excitement we'd once shared. I stared at it for a long moment before slipping it into a drawer, away from the other photos. I wasn't ready to let it go completely, but I couldn't bear to look at it either. Ryan and Sophie were supportive in their own ways. Ryan, ever pragmatic, checked in often, but kept his emotions guarded. Sophie, on the other hand, wore her heartbreak openly. Her calls filled with questions I didn't always have answers to. "Dad," she asked one evening, her voice hesitant, "do you think she ever really loved you?" The question hit me like a punch to the gut, but I forced myself to answer honestly. "I think she did," I said after a pause. "Maybe not in the way I thought, but for a long time, I believed we had something real." Sophie was quiet for a moment. "Do you hate her?" I sighed, running a hand through my hair. "No, I'm angry, and I'm hurt. But hate? No. I loved your mom for 24 years. I can't just erase that." "Do you think she regrets it?" she pressed. "I think she does," I said. "But regret doesn't change what she did." Sophie sniffled, and I heard her take a shaky breath. "I don't know if I can forgive her." "You don't have to," I said gently. "Forgiveness isn't something you do for someone else. It's something you do for yourself, when you're ready." Work became my anchor. I poured myself into every project, every meeting, determined to prove that I could thrive even as my personal life crumbled. My boss, Andrew, was sympathetic, offering to lighten my load, but I refused. "I need this," I told him firmly. "I need to keep moving." He nodded, his expression understanding. "Just don't forget to breathe, Alex. You're no good to anyone burned out." In the evenings, I took long walks through the neighborhood, the cold air clearing my mind. I started cooking again, simple meals at first, but gradually more elaborate dishes as I found joy in the process. It was strange, rediscovering parts of myself that had been buried under the demands of marriage and fatherhood. One Saturday, I decided to check out a local farmer's market. It was bustling with people despite the chill, the scent of fresh bread and roasted coffee wafting through the air. As I browsed a stand of handmade candles, a soft voice interrupted my thoughts. "Excuse me, but you seem like a sandalwood kind of guy." I turned to find a woman smiling at me, her auburn hair tucked beneath a knit hat. She was holding a candle labeled "Sandalwood and Vanilla," her eyes sparkling with a mix of curiosity and humor. I chuckled, caught off guard. "Am I that predictable?" She shrugged playfully. "Maybe, or maybe I just have a good sense for people." For the first time in weeks, I felt a genuine smile tug at my lips. "You might be right. I do like sandalwood." She handed me the candle, her smile widening. "Then it's yours. Consider it my good deed for the day." "Thanks," I said, suddenly aware of how long it had been since I'd had a conversation that wasn't about work or divorce. "I'm Alex, by the way." "Emma," she replied, offering her hand. Her grip was firm, her presence warm. We talked for a while, standing among the bustling crowd. She was a graphic designer, recently relocated to the area, and had a way of making even small talk feel meaningful. When we parted ways, she left with a promise to meet for coffee the following weekend. As I walked back to my car, the sandalwood candle in hand, I felt something I hadn't in a long time: hope. Over the weeks that followed, I began to see Emma more often. Our coffee dates turned into long walks, then dinners, then nights spent talking until the early hours of the morning. She was kind and patient, never pushing me to share more than I was ready for, but always listening when I did. One night, as we sat on her couch with mugs of tea, she asked the question I had been dreading. "Do you think you'll ever trust someone again?" I stared into my tea, the weight of the question settling heavily on my shoulders. "I don't know," I admitted. "It's hard to imagine, but I want to. I want to believe it's possible." Emma reached for my hand, her touch grounding me. "Then start small," she said softly. "Trust me when I say this. You're stronger than you think." Her words stayed with me, echoing in my mind as I took cautious steps toward healing. Trust wouldn't come easily, but for the first time, I believed it might come at all. The budding relationship with Emma became an anchor in my otherwise turbulent life. It wasn't perfect. How could it be? With my wounds still raw and her patience inevitably tested. But it was honest. For the first time in years, I felt like I could be myself without pretense or fear of judgment. One evening, Emma and I strolled along a quiet riverside path, the cool air brushing against our faces. She paused to lean against the railing, gazing out at the water, her profile lit by the golden hues of the setting sun. "Do you think about her?" she asked softly. her voice almost carried away by the breeze. I hesitated, surprised by her question, but not by its accuracy. Laura had been on my mind more often than I liked to admit. Flashes of memory, fragments of our old life that refused to fade. Sometimes, I admitted, leaning next to her. Not in the way I used to. It's more like a scar. You notice it's there, but it doesn't hurt like it once did. Emma turned to me, her eyes searching mine. Do you feel ready to let it go? The question hung in the air, heavy with implication. I knew she wasn't just asking about Laura. She was asking if I was ready to fully open my heart again. I took her hand, my grip firm yet gentle. I'm trying, I said. I don't know if I'll ever be completely ready, but I want to be. She smiled, a mixture of understanding and encouragement. That's all I need. One afternoon, as I worked on a presentation for my new job, my phone buzzed with a call from Sophie. I picked up immediately, her voice trembling on the other end. Dad, it's about Mom, she said, her tone hesitant. My chest tightened. What's wrong? She's been struggling, Sophie said carefully. I think she's depressed. She won't say much to me or Ryan, but I can tell she's not okay. I closed my eyes, the weight of her words settling over me. Laura had always been strong, or at least she projected strength. Hearing that she was unraveling felt like a blow, even after all that had happened. Have you talked to her about it? I asked. I've tried, Sophie said, but she just brushes it off. I don't know what to do. The instinct to protect, to fix things flared within me, but I reminded myself that Laura was no longer my responsibility. Still, I couldn't ignore the concern in Sophie's voice. I'll reach out, I promised. I'll see if there's something I can do. It took me a day to work up the courage to call Laura. When I finally did, her voice on the other end was subdued, lacking its usual warmth. Alex, she said, her tone wary. I wasn't expecting to hear from you. I spoke to Sophie, I began. She's worried about you, so am I. There was a long pause before she responded. I'm fine, she said, but the words were hollow. Laura, I said gently, you don't have to pretend with me. Whatever you're going through, it's okay to admit it. She let out a shaky breath, and for a moment, I thought she might open up, but then she said, You've moved on, Alex. You don't need to worry about me. Her deflection stung, but I didn't push. If you ever need someone to talk to, I'm here, I said. Not as your husband, but as someone who still cares about you. Her only response was a quiet thank you, before she hung up. The call left me unsettled, but it also reinforced my decision to focus on the present. Laura's struggles were hers to navigate now, and while I could offer support from a distance, my priority had to be building a life where I could thrive. Emma and I continued to grow closer. She brought out a side of me I hadn't seen in years, a side that laughed easily, dreamed freely, and dared to hope. We spent weekends exploring the city, hiking trails, and cooking meals that often ended in laughter over burnt edges or missing ingredients. One evening, as we sat on the porch of her small cottage, Emma turned to me, her expression serious. Alex, she said, do you believe in second chances? Her question caught me off guard. I think everyone deserves a second chance, I said slowly, but not at the expense of your own peace. She nodded thoughtfully. I agree, but I also think second chances have to be earned. I realized then that she wasn't just talking about forgiveness or reconciliation. She was talking about trust, about the work it took to rebuild something that had been broken. And for the first time, I understood that moving on didn't mean forgetting. It meant choosing to grow, even when it hurt. Months passed and the divorce was finalized. The house was sold, and I moved into a smaller place closer to the city. Ryan and Sophie visited often, their presence a reminder of the love and resilience that had carried me through the darkest days. One sunny afternoon, Emma and I stood in the middle of a bustling park, a kite soaring high above us. She laughed as the wind tugged at the string, her joy infectious. As I watched her, a thought crystallized in my mind, a realization that while the past had shaped me, it didn't have to define me. For the first time in years, I felt free. I reached for her hand and she smiled up at me, her eyes filled with the promise of something new. Together we walked forward, leaving the shadows behind. As the seasons changed, so did I. The wounds from my marriage, though not entirely healed, began to scar over. With Emma, I felt a kind of peace I hadn't known was possible. But moving forward wasn't a straight path. It was winding, filled with moments of doubt, reflection, and the slow rediscovery of what it meant to truly live. Navigating old ghosts. One evening, As Emma and I shared a quiet dinner on my patio, she brought up a subject we danced around but never fully discussed. Do you ever think about what might have been? She asked, her fork idly pushing through her pasta. I set down my glass of wine, sensing the weight of her question. You mean with Laura? She nodded. With Laura, with your family as it was. Do you miss it? I leaned back, considering her words. I think I miss the idea of it, I admitted. The life I thought we had, the version of her I believed in, but the reality, that's harder to miss. Emma studied me, her gaze soft. Do you ever think you'll forgive her? The question lingered in the air. I don't know, I said honestly. Some days it feels impossible. Other days I think maybe forgiveness is the only way to let go completely. Not for her sake, but for mine. She reached across the table, her hand warm against mine. You're allowed to take your time. Forgiveness doesn't have a deadline. Sophie had grown quieter since learning about her mother's infidelity. She called often, but seemed hesitant to share her feelings. One weekend, I invited her to visit, hoping to bridge the emotional gap. As we sat in the living room, sipping tea, she finally opened up. Dad, she began, her voice wavering. I've been thinking about Mom a lot, about what she did. I nodded, letting her take her time. I'm so angry at her, she said, tears welling in her eyes. Not just for hurting you, but for breaking us, breaking what we had as a family. I moved to sit beside her, placing a comforting hand on her shoulder. It's okay to feel that way, I said. You have every right to be angry. She wiped her eyes, her expression conflicted. Do you think I should try to forgive her? I sighed, choosing my words carefully. Forgiveness is personal. It's not something you do because someone else asked you to. It's something you decide for yourself when you're ready. And if you're not ready, that's okay too. She nodded, her shoulders relaxing slightly. Thanks, Dad. I needed to hear that. As my relationship with Emma deepened, I found myself considering possibilities I hadn't dared to before. We spent weekends together, her presence a constant source of comfort and joy. But one evening, as we watched a movie on her couch, she surprised me. Alex, she said, her tone careful. What do you think about us? I paused the movie and turning to face her. What do you mean? I mean the future, she said, her eyes searching mine. Do you see one for us? Because I do. Her words caught me off guard. For months I had been content to take things slow, unsure if I was ready for another long-term commitment. But as I looked at her, the answer became clear. I see a future with you, I said, my voice steady. I just want to make sure I'm doing it right, that I'm giving you everything you deserve. Emma smiled, her hand resting on my cheek. You are, Alex, more than you know. A glimpse of closure. Not long after, I received a call from Ryan. Dad, he said, Mom wants to meet with you. I froze, the memories of our last conversation resurfacing. What does she want? I asked cautiously. She didn't say, he replied, but she seemed different, like she's trying to make amends. After some thought, I agreed to meet her. We chose a neutral location, a quiet park where we could talk without interruption. When I arrived, Laura was already there, sitting on a bench with her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Alex, she said as I approached, her voice trembling. Thank you for coming. I sat down, keeping a careful distance. What do you want to talk about, Laura? She took a deep breath, her eyes shining with unshed tears. I need to apologize, truly, for everything. I didn't respond immediately, letting her words settle. I know I hurt you, she continued. I hurt our family, and I've spent every day since wishing I could take it back. Her sincerity was evident, but so was her pain. Laura, I said softly, I appreciate your apology, and I believe you mean it, but you need to understand, what's done is done. We can't go back. She nodded, tears streaming down her face. I know, I just needed to say it. For the first time in years, I felt a sense of closure. Laura's words didn't erase the past, but they allowed me to let go of the lingering anger. As I stood to leave, I turned to her one last time. I hope you find peace, Laura, for your sake, and for the kids. The meeting with Laura marked a turning point. From that day forward, I felt lighter, more focused on the life I was building with Emma. We began talking about moving in together, blending our lives in a way that felt natural and right. On a crisp autumn morning, as we walked hand in hand through the park, Emma turned to me with a mischievous smile. Alex, she said, what do you think about taking a leap? A leap? I asked, raising an eyebrow. She nodded, pulling out a flyer for a couple's cooking class. Let's make something new, together. I laughed, the sound genuine and free. I think that's the best idea I've heard in a long time. Emma and I signed up for the couple's cooking class, and it became more than just a fun activity. It was a symbol of the life we were creating together. The class was held in a cozy kitchen studio, the smell of fresh herbs and sizzling butter greeting us as we entered. Couples filled the room, laughing and chatting as they tied aprons around their waist. Emma nudged me with her elbow as we found our station. Ready to become a gourmet chef, Alex? I chuckled, tying my apron. As long as you're ready to taste test my disasters. She grinned. Deal. The class was filled with moments of laughter and intimacy. As we worked side by side, chopping vegetables and stirring sauces, I realized how much I enjoyed sharing these small, everyday moments with Emma. It wasn't about grand gestures or dramatic declarations. It was about the simple joy of being together. At one point, as we attempted to fold delicate pasta into ravioli, Emma burst out laughing at my clumsy efforts. That's not a ravioli, Alex, she teased, holding up my misshapen creation. That's a crime against Italian cuisine. I feigned offense, dramatically clutching my chest. My art is misunderstood. Her laughter was infectious, and I couldn't help but join in. It was moments like these that reminded me of what I had been missing for so long. Not just love, but lightness. Emma brought that into my life in a way I hadn't thought possible. As my relationship with Emma grew, so did my bond with Ryan and Sophie. They visited often, drawn not just by our time together, but by the warmth Emma brought to our gatherings. She had a way of making people feel seen and valued, and my children were no exception. One weekend, we all gathered at my house for a barbecue. Ryan manned the grill while Sophie and Emma prepared a salad in the kitchen. The sound of their laughter floated through the open window as I sat on the patio, sipping a beer and watching the sky turn golden. Ryan joined me, flipping a burger onto a plate and handing it over. She's good for you, Dad, he said, nodding toward the kitchen. You seem happy. I am, I admitted. For the first time in a long time. He smiled, his expression thoughtful. You deserve it. After everything, you deserve to be happy. His words stayed with me, a quiet affirmation that I was finally on the right path. Laura remained a presence in our lives, though from a distance. She and Sophie were slowly rebuilding their relationship, while Ryan maintained a more guarded stance. Occasionally, Sophie would share updates about her mother, how she was in therapy, how she was working to mend her mistakes. One afternoon, Sophie surprised me with a request. Dad, would you ever talk to Mom again? Like, really talk? I hesitated, the question stirring up complicated emotions. Why do you ask? She's been trying so hard, Sophie said. I think she just wants some kind of closure, for both of you. I mulled it over for days, weighing the potential benefits against the risks. Finally, I agreed to meet Laura for coffee. It wasn't an easy decision, but I knew it was time to confront the lingering threads of our shared past. When I walked into the cafe, Laura was already seated, her hands wrapped around a steaming mug. She looked up as I approached, her expression a mix of nervousness and relief. Alex, she said softly, thank you for coming. I nodded, taking a seat across from her. For a moment, we simply looked at each other, the silence heavy with unspoken words. I wanted to see you, she began, because I need you to know how sorry I am, for everything. I took a deep breath, her words both expected and jarring. Laura, I've heard your apology before, and I believe you, but this can't be about fixing the past. It has to be about moving forward. She nodded, tears welling in her eyes. I know, I've been carrying so much guilt, and I needed to say it, one last time. We talked for a while, not just about the betrayal, but about our life together before it fell apart. There was sadness in revisiting those memories, but also a strange sense of comfort. By the end of our conversation, I felt lighter, as though a weight I hadn't realized I was carrying had finally been lifted. As we parted ways, I wished her well, and for the first time, I truly meant it. Months turned into a year, and life with Emma became a steady rhythm of shared routines and quiet joys. We decided to move in together, blending our lives in a way that felt natural and inevitable. Ryan and Sophie supported the decision, their approval a reminder of how far we'd all come. On a sunny spring afternoon, as we unpacked boxes in our new home, Emma turned to me with a playful smile. So, Mr. Gourmet Chef, what's for dinner tonight? I laughed, pulling her into a hug. Whatever you want, as long as you promise not to judge my ravioli this time. She kissed me, her eyes sparkling. Deal. In that moment, surrounded by the warmth of her presence and the promise of a new beginning, I realized that happiness wasn't something you found. It was something you built. And together, Emma and I were building a life worth living. With the foundation of my new life growing steadier each day, I began to focus not just on my relationship with Emma, but also on deepening my connections with Ryan, Sophie, and the people around me. The process of moving on was no longer just about healing. It became about building something richer, fuller, and more meaningful. The new family dynamic. Emma quickly became a beloved presence in Ryan and Sophie's lives. She had a way of bridging gaps, bringing laughter into moments that might otherwise have been heavy. On a warm summer weekend, we hosted a dinner at our new home, inviting both kids to join us. Ryan arrived first, carrying a bottle of wine and a mischievous grin. "Figured this might help with Dad's cooking," he teased, handing the bottle to Emma. Emma laughed, rolling her eyes in mock exasperation. "For your information, your father has been nailing every recipe lately." Ryan arched an eyebrow. "Even the ravioli?" "Especially the ravioli," she said with a wink. By the time Sophie arrived, the house was filled with the scent of roasted vegetables and freshly baked bread. She hugged me tightly at the door, her expression warm. "This place feels like home already," she said, glancing around. As we sat around the table, sharing stories and laughter, I felt a sense of completeness I hadn't experienced in years. It wasn't the family I had once envisioned, but it was a family nonetheless. One built on resilience, love, and the willingness to move forward. Later that evening, as Sophie and Emma cleared the table, Ryan and I sat on the porch, the stars scattered across the sky. He was quiet for a moment before speaking. "Dad, can I ask you something?" "Of course," I said, turning to him. "How did you do it?" he asked, his voice tinged with vulnerability. "How did you let go of everything that happened with Mom?" I took a deep breath, his question striking a chord. "It wasn't easy," I admitted. "And it didn't happen all at once. There were days I didn't think I'd ever stop feeling angry or hurt. But over time, I realized holding on to that pain was only hurting me. Letting go didn't mean forgetting. It meant making room for something better." Ryan nodded, his gaze thoughtful. "I think I'm still figuring that out," he said. "I want to forgive her, but it's hard. And that's okay," I said gently. "Forgiveness isn't a race. You'll get there when you're ready." He looked at me, a small smile playing on his lips. "You've gotten pretty good at this whole wisdom thing." I laughed. "It only took me 50 years. As our relationship deepened, Emma began sharing more about her own history. One evening, as we sat on the couch with glasses of wine, she opened up about a difficult chapter in her life. "I wasn't always good at this," she said, gesturing between us. "Relationships, I mean." I tilted my head, curious. "What do you mean?" She sighed, her gaze distant. "Before I moved here, I was in a long-term relationship. We were together for years and I thought we were happy, but he cheated on me." Her words hit me like a punch, the parallel to my own experience undeniable. "Emma, I'm so sorry," I said, reaching for her hand. She squeezed it gently. "It was a long time ago, but it shaped me. For a while, I didn't think I could trust anyone again, but meeting you, it's been different. You make me believe it's possible." Her vulnerability moved me, and I leaned forward to kiss her softly. "You've given me that too," I said. "You've shown me that trust can be rebuilt, even when it feels impossible." We sat in silence for a while, the weight of her story settling between us. It wasn't just my past we were navigating, it was hers too, and together we were finding a way forward. As my 50th birthday approached, Emma and the kids decided to throw a surprise party. I arrived home one evening to find the house filled with friends, laughter, and the smell of Emma's famous chocolate cake. Ryan and Sophie greeted me at the door, their smiles wide. "Happy birthday, Dad," they exclaimed in unison, pulling me into a group hug. I laughed, overwhelmed by the gesture. "You two planned this?" "Emma helped," Sophie admitted, nodding toward the kitchen where Emma was lighting candles on the cake. The party was a mix of old and new, colleagues from work, neighbors, and even a few friends from my previous life. As I mingled, I felt a sense of gratitude I hadn't anticipated. These were my people, my community, and they had stood by me through everything. When it came time to cut the cake, Emma brought it to the table, the candles flickering in the dim light. She leaned in close, her voice warm. "Make a wish, Alex." I looked around the room, at the faces of the people I loved, and realized I didn't need to wish for anything. Everything I needed was already here. As the weeks turned into months, Emma and I began talking about the future in earnest. We discussed travel plans, merging our finances, and even the possibility of marriage. Though the idea scared me at first, it also filled me with hope. One evening, as we walked through a quiet park, Emma turned to me, her eyes sparkling. "Alex," she said, "Where do you see us in 5 years?" I smiled, considering her question. "Hopefully still walking through parks like this, talking about everything and nothing. Maybe we'll have a little garden, a dog, and a porch swing to sit on." She laughed, her hand slipping into mine. "That sounds perfect." And for the first time in a long time, I believed it. As Emma and I continued to blend our lives, the conversations about our future grew more serious. What had started as casual companionship turned into something deeply rooted. A partnership that felt like a second chance, not just for love, but for a life shared without pretense or fear. Taking the next step one evening, as we relaxed on the couch with a movie playing in the background, Emma broached a subject we had danced around for months. "Alex," she said, her voice careful but firm, "have you thought about us without moving forward, making this official?" Her words caught me off guard, though I couldn't deny I had been thinking the same thing. I sat up facing her and took her hand. "I have," I admitted. "I've been wondering if you'd be ready for that." Emma laughed softly. "Alex, I've been ready. I just didn't want to push you if you weren't." I smiled, a warmth spreading through my chest. "I think I'm ready too. More than ready, actually." Her grin widened and she pulled me into a hug. "Then let's do it," she said. "Let's make it official." Ryan and Sophie were the first to hear about our decision. I invited them over for dinner, wanting to share the news in person. As we gathered around the table, Emma and I exchanged a glance, silently agreeing that it was time. "I have something to tell you both," I began, my tone calm but excited. Sophie immediately leaned forward, her eyes lighting up. "What is it?" "Emma and I have decided to get married," I said, watching their reactions closely. Ryan's eyes widened, and Sophie let out a delighted squeal. "Oh my God, Dad, that's amazing," she exclaimed, rushing around the table to hug both of us. Ryan smiled, his expression warm but measured. "Congratulations, Dad. Emma's been great for you. This feels right." Hearing their approval was a relief, and as the evening went on, we talked about the wedding plans, how we envisioned the day, and what it would mean for our family. Neither Emma nor I wanted a big wedding. We both agreed on a simple ceremony, surrounded by close friends and family. The venue was a small garden near the park where we often walked, the setting intimate and serene. On the day of the wedding, as I stood under the arbor waiting for Emma, I felt a sense of calm I hadn't expected. When she appeared, her dress flowing gently in the breeze, and her smile radiant, my heart swelled with gratitude. This wasn't just a second chance. It was a new beginning. The ceremony was filled with laughter, heartfelt vows, and tears of joy. Ryan and Sophie stood by my side, their support unwavering, while Emma's closest friends cheered her on. It was a day marked not by extravagance, but by genuine love and connection. Married life with Emma felt like a natural extension of what we'd already built. We settled into a rhythm, balancing work, family, and our shared hobbies. She continued to encourage me to step out of my comfort zone, whether it was trying new recipes, joining a local hiking group, or even taking dance lessons. One evening, as we danced clumsily around the living room to a slow jazz tune, Emma laughed, her head resting against my chest. "You know," she said, "you're not half bad at this." I chuckled, spinning her gently. "It's all thanks to my teacher." She smiled up at me, her eyes full of warmth. "You make everything feel easy, Alex." With Emma now officially part of the family, Ryan and Sophie grew closer to her in ways I hadn't anticipated. Ryan sought her advice on navigating his own relationship, while Sophie found in Emma a confidant she could trust. One afternoon, as Emma and Sophie sat on the porch chatting over tea, I watched from the kitchen window, a sense of contentment settling over me. The bond they had formed was genuine, a reminder that love could take many forms and heal in unexpected ways. Ryan too surprised me one evening when he pulled me aside during a family dinner. "You know," he said, "I was skeptical at first, not about Emma, but about whether you were ready for this. But seeing you two together, it's like watching a new version of you, a happier one." His words stayed with me, a quiet validation of the journey I had taken to rebuild my life. As Emma and I approached our first anniversary, we began talking about the future in bigger terms. Travel plans became a regular topic of conversation. Emma dreamed of visiting Italy, while I was drawn to the idea of exploring quiet mountain towns. "Why not both?" she teased one evening as we pored over travel brochures. "We've got time." Her words reminded me of something I had once feared, that time was running out. That life after betrayal would be marked only by loss. But now, sitting beside her, planning adventures and dreaming of what lay ahead, I knew that time was a gift, and I intended to make the most of it. As Emma and I settled into our life together, we leaned into the freedom that came with rebuilding from scratch. Our relationship became a partnership, not just in love, but in exploration of new places, new experiences, and new ways of understanding ourselves and each other. Italy became our first major trip, a dream Emma had nurtured for years. We spent weeks planning, poring over guidebooks and travel blogs. When the day finally came, boarding the plane felt like stepping into a new chapter of our lives. Our days in Italy were a blur of beauty and wonder. We strolled through the cobblestone streets of Florence, marveled at the canals of Venice, and indulged in pasta and wine at tiny family-run trattorias. One evening, as we watched the sun set over the rolling hills of Tuscany, Emma turned to me with a soft smile. "This feels like a dream," she said, her hand slipping into mine. "It feels like the start of something bigger," I replied, squeezing her hand. "A life we get to create together." Her eyes glistened, and she leaned her head against my shoulder. "Thank you for believing in this, in us." Coming home after the trip felt like a return not just to our house, but to a life we were excited to build. Inspired by the simplicity and warmth of Italian culture, we started hosting regular dinners with Ryan, Sophie, and a growing circle of friends. Emma loved experimenting with recipes we'd picked up during our travels, while I relished the role of host, a glass of wine always at the ready. One evening, as Sophie helped Emma in the kitchen, Ryan pulled me aside. "You and Emma seem so solid," he said, his tone thoughtful. "It's inspiring, honestly." I raised an eyebrow, smiling. "Thinking about taking the plunge yourself?" He chuckled, scratching the back of his neck. "Maybe, seeing how you've rebuilt. It makes me believe it's possible." His words struck a chord. The journey hadn't been easy, but hearing that it had inspired my children gave it a new layer of meaning. One weekend, Sophie arrived with a surprise announcement. She had been accepted into a prestigious graduate program overseas and would be leaving in a few months. While her excitement was palpable, I couldn't help but feel a pang of sadness at the thought of her being so far away. "You'll visit, won't you?" she asked, her eyes sparkling with anticipation. "Of course," I said, pulling her into a hug. "But you'd better send lots of pictures." As we celebrated her achievement, Emma leaned over to whisper, "She's going to thrive. You've given her the strength to chase this." Her words stayed with me, a reminder that my role as a father was evolving, but it wasn't any less important. One afternoon, as Emma and I browsed a local art fair, I spotted a familiar face. It was Laura, standing at a jewelry booth, her expression distant. She hadn't seen me yet, and for a moment I debated whether to approach her. Emma noticed my hesitation and followed my gaze. "Do you want to say hello?" she asked gently. I considered it, then nodded. "Yeah, I think I should." As I approached, Laura turned, her eyes widening in surprise. "Alex," she said, her tone cautious. "Hi." "Hi, Laura," I replied, offering a small smile. "How are you?" She hesitated, then nodded. "I'm better, taking things day by day." We exchanged a few polite words, catching up briefly. When I mentioned Sophie's graduate program, Laura's face lit up with pride. "She told me," she said. "I'm so happy for her." Before we parted, Laura looked at me, her expression serious. "I'm glad to see you're doing well, Alex. You deserve it." "Thank you," I said, meaning it. "I hope you're finding your way, too." As I walked back to Emma, I felt a sense of closure. Laura was part of my past, but she no longer held the power to weigh me down. My focus was on the life I was building with Emma and the future that stretched ahead of us. A year later, Ryan announced his engagement, and Sophie, despite being overseas, played an active role in helping him plan the wedding. Emma and I were thrilled, offering our home as a venue for the rehearsal dinner. On the day of the wedding, as I watched Ryan exchange vows with his partner, I felt a swell of pride. He had navigated his own challenges with grace, and seeing him so happy reaffirmed my belief in the resilience of love. After the ceremony, as the family gathered for photos, Ryan pulled Emma and me into a group hug. "You two set the bar," he said with a grin. "No pressure or anything." Emma laughed, her arm around my waist. "Just keep being yourself, Ryan. That's all it takes." With each passing year, Emma and I continued to grow, both as individuals and as a couple. Our adventures took us to new places, from the bustling streets of Tokyo to the quiet beauty of the Scottish Highlands. But it was the life we shared at home, the laughter, the quiet mornings, the deep conversations, that truly defined our happiness. One evening, as we sat on the porch watching the stars, Emma turned to me with a question. "Do you ever think about the version of your life you had before, the one you thought you'd always have?" I considered her words, then shook my head. "I think about it sometimes, but not with regret. That life taught me a lot, about love, about resilience, about myself. But this life, This is the one I was meant to have. She smiled, resting her head on my shoulder. I'm glad you think so. As I wrapped my arm around her, the future felt bright, not because it was free of challenges, but because we faced it together. And that, I realized, was all I needed. The years that followed were marked by milestones both large and small. Emma and I continued to embrace life with open hearts, creating a story that blended our past into a shared, harmonious present. It wasn't always perfect, nothing ever is, but the imperfections made it ours. 2 years after Ryan's wedding, I received a call that made my heart swell with joy. Ryan's voice on the other end was filled with excitement. "Dad," he said, barely able to contain himself. "You're going to be a grandfather." The words took a moment to register. "Are you serious?" I asked, laughing as tears pricked my eyes. "Dead serious," he replied. "We just found out, and we couldn't wait to tell you." Emma, who had been listening nearby, rushed over, her expression eager. "What is it?" she asked, and when I shared the news, her face lit up. Over the months that followed, Emma became just as involved in the preparations as I was. She helped Ryan and his wife set up a nursery, offering her warm, practical wisdom at every turn. When their daughter was born, holding that tiny life in my arms filled me with the kind of love I hadn't realized was possible. "I think she likes you," Ryan teased, and as his newborn grasped my finger, Emma stood beside me, her hand resting on my shoulder. "Of course she does. She knows she has the best grandfather in the world." Sophie returned from her graduate program a year later, her time abroad having transformed her into a more confident, assured version of herself. During her first dinner back home, she pulled me aside. "Dad," she said, her voice steady but thoughtful, "I've been thinking about Mom." I set down my glass, bracing myself. "What about her?" "I've been talking to her more," she admitted. "She's changed a lot. I think she's finally come to terms with what happened." I nodded, appreciating Sophie's candor. "That's good," I said, "for her and for you." Sophie hesitated before continuing. "Would you ever consider, I don't know, reconnecting, not as anything more than friends, but just so it doesn't feel unfinished?" Her words gave me pause. Laura and I had parted on civil terms, and though I had moved on, there was still a sense of distance that hadn't been bridged. "Maybe," I said after a moment, "if the time feels right." A few months later, I received a letter in the mail. The handwriting on the envelope was unmistakably Laura's, though the tone of the letter itself was different, more measured, more reflective. In it, she wrote about her life since the divorce. She shared her struggles, her regrets, and the ways she had worked to rebuild herself. "I know I can never undo the hurt I caused," she wrote, "but I hope someday you can think of me without pain." Her words were a surprising comfort. They didn't change the past, but they offered a kind of peace I hadn't known I needed. After reading it, I shared the letter with Emma, who listened carefully as I summarized its contents. "How do you feel about it?" she asked, her voice gentle. "I think I'm finally at peace," I said. "It's not forgiveness exactly, but I don't feel angry anymore." Emma smiled, leaning into me. "That's a good place to be." In the years that followed, life continued to unfold in beautiful, unexpected ways. Sophie started a nonprofit that quickly became her passion, and Ryan's family grew, filling our lives with the joyful chaos of young children. Emma and I embraced our roles as grandparents, delighting in every milestone, every visit, every story shared at the dinner table. Travel remained a cornerstone of our life together. We explored the vibrant streets of Morocco, marveled at the northern lights in Iceland, and even took a road trip across the United States. Each journey brought new experiences, but it was always the return home, to the life we'd built, that felt most rewarding. On the eve of our 10th wedding anniversary, Emma and I sat on the porch watching the stars. The night was quiet, the air warm and filled with the scent of blooming jasmine. "Do you ever think about how far we've come?" she asked, her voice soft. "All the time," I said, taking her hand. "I don't think I've ever been more grateful for where life has taken me." She smiled, her head resting on my shoulder. "Me too. It's not the life I imagined, but it's better. Because it's ours." As I held her close, I felt a profound sense of contentment. The pain of the past had shaped me, but it hadn't defined me. Love had found its way back into my life, not as a replacement, but as a new beginning, a testament to the resilience of the human heart. And in that moment, with the stars above, and the woman I loved by my side, I knew that life, with all its twists and turns, was truly beautiful. As life continued to unfold, Emma and I found ourselves surrounded by love. Not just our own, but the connections we nurtured with our family and the friends who had become like family. Our lives weren't without challenges, but they were rich with meaning, woven together with memories of the journey we had taken to get here. As Ryan's children grew, Emma and I became the go-to grandparents. Our home was always open to them, a haven of laughter and learning. We built tree houses, played hide and seek, and hosted backyard campouts where the kids would roast marshmallows and beg for stories about when their dad was a little troublemaker. One evening, as I tucked my granddaughter into bed after a long day of play, she asked a question that stopped me in my tracks. "Grandpa," she said, her small voice thoughtful, "how do you make people happy all the time?" I smiled, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "I don't always make people happy, sweetheart, but I try my best to be kind and to show people I love them." Her little brow furrowed in concentration. "Like how you love Grandma Emma?" "Exactly like that," I said, my chest swelling with pride and gratitude. "Love is the most important thing we can give each other." She nodded, her eyes growing heavy with sleep. "I think you're really good at it." As she drifted off, her words lingered in my heart. They reminded me that the life Emma and I had built wasn't just for us. It was a foundation for the next generation. Sophie, always the ambitious one, made the bold decision to move overseas permanently to expand her nonprofit. The announcement was bittersweet. While Emma and I were proud of her courage and commitment, the thought of her being so far away was difficult to accept. During her farewell dinner, Sophie took my hand. "Dad," she said, her voice steady but emotional, "I wouldn't be the person I am without you. You taught me how to move forward, even when things feel impossible." Her words brought tears to my eyes. "I'll miss you more than you know," I said, "but I'm so proud of you, Soph. You're changing the world." As she hugged Emma and me tightly, I realized that letting go was another form of love. Trusting her to forge her path while knowing she carried our lessons with her. One unexpected joy came from reconnecting with people I hadn't seen in years. Laura's letter had prompted me to reflect on other relationships I had let drift away. Among them was Mike, her ex-brother-in-law, and a man who had once been one of my closest friends. I reached out to Mike, unsure if he'd even want to hear from me. To my surprise, he responded warmly, and we arranged to meet for coffee. Sitting across from him, the years melted away as we reminisced about old times. Mike had remarried and seemed genuinely happy, though he admitted, the past had left its marks. "I never blamed you for what happened with Laura and Victoria," he said, his tone sincere. "You did what you had to do, and honestly, it helped me see things more clearly." His forgiveness was a balm I hadn't realized I needed. As we parted ways, we agreed to stay in touch, and over time, our friendship grew into something new. A connection rooted in shared history and mutual respect. Life's unpredictability came into sharp focus one winter when Emma experienced a sudden health scare. What began as a routine checkup turned into a whirlwind of tests and a minor surgical procedure. Though the prognosis was good, the experience was a stark reminder of how fragile life could be. As she recovered, I found myself more attentive than ever, cherishing every moment we had together. One evening, as I sat by her bedside, she reached for my hand. "You don't have to fuss over me," she said with a soft smile. "I'm going to be fine." "I know," I said, squeezing her hand, "but I don't want to take a single moment for granted." Her eyes filled with tears, and she pulled me closer. "I love you, Alex. You've made my life better in ways I never thought possible. And you've done the same for me," I said, my voice steady but emotional. "We're in this together, Emma, always." As Emma regained her strength, we celebrated her recovery with a trip to the Pacific Northwest, a place she had always wanted to explore. The trip became a series of quiet, reflective moments, watching the sunrise over Mount Rainier, walking along misty beaches, and sitting by a crackling fire as rain pattered against the cabin windows. One evening, as we sipped hot cocoa and watched the waves, Emma turned to me. "Do you think we've done it?" she asked. "Built the life we wanted?" I took a moment to consider her question. "I think we've done more than that," I said. "We've built the life we didn't even know we needed." She smiled, her hand finding mine. "Then let's keep building." Years later, as I sat in the backyard with Emma by my side and our grandchildren playing around us, I reflected on the journey that had brought me here. The pain of the past hadn't disappeared, but it had softened, becoming a part of the tapestry of my life rather than a weight I carried. Ryan and Sophie were thriving, their lives filled with love and purpose, Emma and I had built a partnership that was more than I could have ever dreamed, and our extended family, both by blood and by choice, reminded me daily of the power of resilience and connection. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky with hues of orange and pink, Emma leaned her head against my shoulder. "Do you ever think about how far we've come?" she asked softly. "All the time," I replied, kissing the top of her head. "And I wouldn't change a thing." Life, with all its twists and turns, had led me to a place of profound gratitude. The love I had found, the family I had nurtured, and the legacy I hoped to leave behind were a testament to the strength it takes to rebuild after loss. And in the end, I realized it wasn't about the journey itself, but the people who walked it with me. As the years unfolded, Emma and I became the quiet, steady anchors for our family. We were there for the big moments, graduations, weddings, and the birth of each new grandchild, but also for the small ones, the everyday exchanges that formed the heart of our lives. It was in those moments that I began to think more deeply about legacy, not just what I would leave behind, but what I was passing on in the present. Ryan's eldest daughter, Ella, had grown into a curious and perceptive teenager. She often came to visit us on her own, relishing the calm and wisdom she found in our home. One evening, as we sat on the porch watching fireflies dance in the twilight, she asked a question that took me by surprise. "Grandpa," she began, "how do you know when something is worth fighting for?" I leaned back in my chair, letting her words settle. "That's a big question," I said. "What made you think of it?" She shrugged, fiddling with the hem of her shirt. "I guess I've been thinking about how you and Grandma Emma got together, and about how things didn't work out with, Grandma Laura. How do you decide what's worth holding on to?" Her honesty struck me, and I took a moment to gather my thoughts. "It's not always easy to know," I said, "but here's what I've learned. You fight for the things that make you better, the things that help you grow. And sometimes letting go is the hardest fight of all, because it means choosing what's best for you, even when it hurts." Ella nodded, her expression contemplative. "Do you think I'll know when it's time to let go?" "I think you will," I said, placing a hand on hers. "And when that time comes, you'll have people who love you to help you through it." Emma and I found ourselves becoming more involved in our community as the years went on. We volunteered at local organizations, mentored younger couples, and hosted gatherings that brought people together in ways that felt meaningful and real. One such gathering was a potluck we organized to celebrate the end of summer. Families and friends filled our backyard, the air buzzing with conversation and laughter. As I manned the grill, flipping burgers and chatting with neighbors, Emma approached with a mischievous smile. "What's that look for?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. She gestured to the crowd. "Look at what we've built, Alex. It's not just us anymore. It's this, all of it." I paused, letting her words sink in. She was right. What had started as a quiet rebuilding of our lives had blossomed into something much larger, a network of love and support that extended far beyond the two of us. Sophie's work overseas kept her busy, but she made it a priority to visit whenever she could. One summer, she surprised us with an extended stay, bringing with her a renewed sense of purpose and confidence. One afternoon, as we walked through the garden, Sophie turned to me with a smile. "Dad, I've been thinking a lot about everything you've taught me, about resilience and love and forgiveness." I smiled, touched by her words. "You've always been strong, Sophie. You just needed to see it for yourself." She nodded, her expression serious. "I think I've finally forgiven Mom for everything." Her admission filled me with a sense of pride and relief. "That's a big step," I said, "and it's a testament to your heart." She hugged me tightly. "I wouldn't have gotten here without you." As Emma and I approached our 15th wedding anniversary, we began to reflect on the life we had built together. Our adventures had taken us to countless places, but there were still so many more we wanted to see. One evening, as we sat by the fire, Emma turned to me with a sparkle in her eye. "Alex, what do you think about one more big trip?" I grinned, already knowing where this was headed. "Where to this time?" She pulled out a map, her excitement palpable. "South America. I want to see the Amazon, Machu Picchu, and the beaches of Brazil. Let's make it a grand adventure." Her enthusiasm was infectious, and we spent the next few months planning the trip of a lifetime. When the days came, we embarked with a sense of wonder, ready to embrace the unknown together. During one quiet evening in Brazil, as we watched the sunset from a secluded beach, Emma turned to me with a question. "Do you think we've lived the life we were meant to live?" I considered her words, looking out at the waves crashing gently against the shore. "I think we've lived the life we chose," I said, "and that's what makes it meaningful." She smiled, her hand finding mine. "I wouldn't trade it for anything." "Neither would I," Life hadn't turned out the way I once imagined, but it had become something even better. It was a testament to the power of love, resilience, and the willingness to embrace the unexpected. With every passing year, life became less about monumental changes and more about appreciating the steady rhythm of a well-lived journey. Emma and I leaned into the roles we had carved out for ourselves, partners, parents, grandparents, and friends, and discovered that legacy was not just what you left behind, but what you created every single day. As our family grew, Emma and I decided to start a new tradition, an annual family retreat. We rented a large cabin nestled in the mountains, a place where Ryan, Sophie, and their families could come together for a weekend of connection and celebration. The first retreat was a mix of chaos and magic. The grandchildren raced through the woods, building forts and collecting wildflowers, while the adults took turns preparing meals and sharing stories around the fire. One evening, as we all gathered for s'mores, Ryan's youngest son, Max, climbed into my lap. "Grandpa," he said, his voice serious, "are we going to do this every year?" I smiled, ruffling his hair. "That's the plan, buddy. You like it?" He nodded enthusiastically. "It's the best. You're the best." I hugged him tightly, my heart full. Moments like these reminded me why I had fought so hard to rebuild my life, to create a space where love could thrive and grow. In her early 70s, Emma discovered a love for painting. What started as a casual hobby quickly became a deep passion. Her days often spent in a sunlit corner of our home, surrounded by canvases and brushes. One day, as I admired her latest work, a vibrant depiction of a sunrise over the mountains, she turned to me with a thoughtful expression. "You've always been my greatest inspiration," she said. I laughed softly. "Me? I think you've got that backward." She shook her head, smiling. "No, really. You've shown me what it means to keep going, to keep finding beauty no matter what life throws at you. That's what I try to capture in these." Her words stayed with me, a testament to the way we had lifted and inspired each other through the years. One autumn, as Emma and I strolled through a local park, we stumbled upon an art fair. To my surprise, several booths were selling prints of Emma's paintings, which had gained recognition in the local community. "Look at this," I said, holding up a framed print of one of her works. "You're famous." Emma laughed, blushing slightly. "Hardly, but it's nice to know my work resonates with people." We spent the afternoon chatting with vendors and visitors, many of whom expressed how much Emma's art had touched them. Seeing her passion recognized was a source of immense pride, and it reminded me of the power of creativity to bring joy and meaning to life. As Emma and I approached our 80s, we decided to write letters to each of our grandchildren. The idea was simple: to share the lessons we had learned and the stories we wanted them to carry forward. In my letter, I wrote about resilience, love, and the importance of embracing change. I shared memories of my life with Emma, the challenges we had faced, and the fact we had found in building a life together. "Life won't always be easy," I wrote. "But if there's one thing I want you to remember, it's this: love fiercely, forgive when you can, and never stop looking for the beauty in the world around you. It's there, even in the hardest moments." When the letters were complete, we sealed them in envelopes and placed them in a box to be given to the grandchildren when they were old enough to understand the weight of our words. On Emma's 80th birthday, the family gathered once again, this time in our backyard. The celebration was filled with laughter, music, and a slideshow of photos that chronicled the incredible journey of her life. As the evening wound down, Ryan stood to make a toast. "To Mom and to Emma," he said, raising his glass. "You've shown us all what it means to live with courage and love, and you've built a family that will carry that legacy forward." The cheers that followed were warm and heartfelt, a reflection of the love that surrounded us. In the quiet moments after the celebration, Emma and I sat together on the porch watching the stars. She leaned her head on my shoulder, her hand resting lightly on mine. "Do you ever think about how we got here?" she asked. "Every day," I said, "and I wouldn't change a thing." She smiled, her eyes glistening in the moonlight. "Me neither. It's been a good life, Alex." "It's been the best life," I agreed, and as we sat there, enveloped in the stillness of the night and the warmth of our love, I knew that no matter what lay ahead, the life we had built would continue to shine brightly in the hearts of those we had touched. With the years rolling by, Emma and I found ourselves immersed in the daily joys of a life well lived, while milestones continued to dot the horizon. It was the everyday moments, the laughter of grandchildren, the smell of fresh-baked bread in the kitchen, or a walk under the changing leaves, that gave our days richness and depth. One rainy afternoon, our youngest grandchild, Clara, sat cross-legged on the living room rug, staring up at me with wide, curious eyes. "Grandpa," she said, clutching a stuffed bear tightly, "tell me a story, a real one, about you and Grandma." I chuckled, exchanging a glance with Emma, who was perched on the couch with a book. A real story, huh? Well, let me think. I launched into the tale of one of our early adventures, a spur-of-the-moment road trip that had ended with a flat tire in the middle of nowhere. Emma chimed in, adding her own details, like how I had insisted we could fix the tire ourselves. We couldn't. And how we'd ended up camping under the stars that night. By the time the story was finished, Clara was giggling uncontrollably. "You're so silly, Grandpa," she declared, her laughter infectious. Emma leaned over, her smile warm. "That's one of the things I love about him," she said, ruffling Clara's hair. "He always finds a way to make things an adventure." Emma's passion for gardening blossomed into a full-fledged project as she turned our backyard into a sanctuary of color and life. Rows of vegetables flourished alongside vibrant flowers, while a small koi pond became a favorite spot for the grandchildren. One spring morning, as Emma and I worked side by side planting tomatoes, she paused to brush a strand of hair from her face. "Do you ever think we'd end up here?" she asked, gesturing to the lush garden around us. I smiled, wiping dirt from my hands. "Not exactly, but I can't imagine it any other way." She laughed softly. "It's funny, isn't it? How the little things, planting seeds, pulling weeds, can bring so much joy." Later that evening, as we sat on the patio admiring the day's work, Ryan's children ran through the garden, their laughter ringing out like music. Watching them play, I felt a sense of gratitude that was hard to put into words. Ella, now a young woman, had become increasingly passionate about social justice. Inspired by her Aunt Sophie's work overseas, one afternoon, she visited us with a notebook full of ideas for a community project she wanted to start. "Grandpa, Grandma," she said, her excitement bubbling over, "I'm going to organize a drive to collect supplies for families in need, but I need some help getting started." Emma and I listened as she laid out her vision, offering advice and encouragement. Over the following weeks, we helped her design flyers, collect donations, and organize a distribution day at a local community center. On the day of the event, as families lined up to receive the supplies, Ella turned to me, her eyes shining with pride. "Oh, God, I couldn't have done this without you and Grandma," she said. I shook my head. "You did this, Ella. We just gave you a little nudge." Watching her that day, I felt a deep sense of pride, knowing that the values we had worked so hard to instill were being carried forward in ways that truly mattered. While our international travel had slowed, Emma and I discovered the joy of exploring closer to home. From day trips to hidden hiking trails, to weekends spent visiting small-town festivals, we embraced the charm of the world just outside our doorstep. One particularly memorable trip took us to a nearby vineyard, where we spent the afternoon sampling wines and learning about the winemaking process. As we strolled through the rows of grapevines, Emma looped her arm through mine. "Do you think we'll ever stop adventuring?" she asked. She asked, a playful twinkle in her eye. "Not a chance," I said with a grin. "As long as we're together, there's always an adventure waiting." That became a mantra of sorts, a reminder that life didn't have to be grand to be extraordinary. It was the act of sharing it with each other that made it so. Sophie's periodic visits continue to be a highlight of our lives. On one of her trips home, she brought with her a new partner, Elena, a vibrant, intelligent woman who quickly became a cherished member of the family. Watching Sophie and Elena interact, I couldn't help but marvel at how far Sophie had come. Her confidence and happiness were palpable, a testament to her resilience and the love she had found. During one evening by the fire, Sophie pulled me aside. "Dad," she said, her voice full of emotion, "thank you for always supporting me, for showing me what love can look like." Her words struck a chord, and I pulled her into a hug. "You deserve all the happiness in the world, Soph," I said, "and I'm so proud of the life you've built." One winter, Emma decided to embark on an ambitious project, a family quilt. She collected pieces of fabric from old clothing, tablecloths, and even the children's drawings, stitching them together into a vibrant tapestry of memories. When the quilt was finished, she unveiled it during a family dinner. As she spread it out on the table, the room filled with gasps and laughter. "This is amazing, Grandma," Clara exclaimed, running her fingers over the colorful patches. "It's like a picture of our whole family." Emma smiled, her eyes shining with pride. That's exactly what it is, a way to remember all the little moments that make us who we are. The quilt became a treasured heirloom, a physical representation of the love and connection that bound us together. As the years passed, life became quieter, but no less meaningful. Emma and I embraced the rhythm of our days, surrounded by the people we loved and the memories we had created. Our home remained a gathering place, a haven where family and friends could always find warmth, laughter, and a sense of belonging. The garden that Emma had lovingly tended became a symbol of our life together, vibrant, resilient, and ever-growing. It was there, one summer evening, that the family gathered to celebrate our 25th wedding anniversary. The grandchildren played among the flowers, their laughter filling the air, while Ryan and Sophie stood side by side, raising glasses to toast us. "To Mom and Dad," Ryan began, his voice strong but emotional. "You've shown us what it means to live with love, to face challenges with grace, and to find joy in the everyday. We're all better because of you." Sophie chimed in, her smile radiant. "You've created something so much bigger than a marriage. You've created a legacy of love that will live on in all of us." As their words settled over the group, I looked at Emma, her eyes glistening with tears. "It's been a good life, hasn't it?" I asked softly. She nodded, her hand slipping into mine. "It's been the best life." In the twilight of our years, Emma and I often found ourselves sitting on the porch, watching the sunset and reminiscing about the journey we had taken. One evening, as the sky turned shades of gold and purple, Emma turned to me with a gentle smile. "Do you think we did it right?" she asked. I considered her question, the weight of our shared experiences filling my heart. "I think we did it the only way we knew how," I said. "With love, with hope, and with each other." She rested her head on my shoulder, her voice a soft whisper. "I wouldn't trade a single moment." Neither would I. The life we had built was far from perfect, but it was ours, a testament to resilience, to the power of starting over, and to the beauty of finding love in unexpected places. Years later, when Emma's health began to decline, our family rallied around us, their love a reflection of everything we had poured into them. As she rested in her favorite chair by the window, surrounded by the vibrant garden she had created, I held her hand, cherishing every moment. "Thank you, Alex," she said one afternoon, her voice soft but steady. "For what?" I asked, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "For this life, for believing in us, for being my adventure." Tears filled my eyes as I leaned closer. "Thank you, Emma, for giving me a reason to believe." When she passed peacefully one autumn morning, the garden bathed in golden light. It felt like the closing of a beautiful chapter. Our family came together to honor her life, celebrating the joy and love she had brought to us all. In the years that followed, I found comfort in the memories we had created and the family we had nurtured. Ryan, Sophie, and their children carried Emma's spirit forward, their lives a testament to the values she had embodied. As for me, I continued to tend the garden, finding solace in the act of nurturing something that would outlive me. It became a place of reflection, a living reminder of the love that had defined my life. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, I sat on the porch, the quilt Emma had made draped over my lap. The air was filled with the scent of blooming jasmine, and I felt a deep, abiding peace. Life hadn't turned out the way I had once imagined, but it had given me so much more. It had given me love, purpose, and a legacy that would endure long after I was gone. And as I watched the stars appear one by one, I whispered a quiet thank you to the universe, for the journey, for the love, and for the gift of a life well lived. If you enjoy stories like this and want to hear more, don't forget to subscribe to our channel, hit the like button, and share it with friends who might enjoy these journeys as well. There's plenty more in store, and we'd love to have you along for the ride.